Good morning. Oh, I can't hear you. I didn't. Is something wrong with me? No, I think I've got my volume on.
It accidentally muted on the phone. So brilliant. You okay? Okay, you all right?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm having a bit of a rough health day, but I'm hanging in there.
That's all
Um,
right. Okay, good, good, good. I'm just
yeah,
checking my perception,
yeah.
to see. So, all right.
But I am coming early because our cat is at the vet getting some teeth extracted, and I suspect that they're going to call me probably during our normal time and want me to come pick him up. So I figured I would go ahead and join early. I wasn't sure when they were going to get to him, but they just called a few minutes ago and said they were working on him now. So I figured I would check
Oh,
and
I
see
love
if
it. I love
it's
it. I love it. I love
early.
it. I love it. I love it. Did you see my post that I made? The one about rationalization.
Did I see a post about rationalization? Maybe.
It was just two quotes that I made.
Oh, maybe not then.
But then I made, a couple of people responded, and I elaborated in a comment later on. But I did want to just
Oh no,
chat
I
about
didn't
it.
see
Have a
that.
look at it real quick. Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Rationalization is a subtle psychosis. We have to carefully choose what we wish to believe, since once chosen, we'll find plenty to substantiate our choice. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's huge. It's huge. It's a really big deal. So it's all about what we've been talking about, the variability of truth, which brings us to living with uncertainty, right? And that's if you scroll down and look at my longer comment underneath there, the sort of tail end of things. I go into depth a little bit about this and the sacredness, at least to me, the sacredness of probability, because this is how we end up dealing with uncertainty. Everything becomes probability. As best we know, we assess the probability and we go with that, right? So,
Right,
I mean, I'm looking at this with in the context of it. Really is a deep issue for me, in terms of people that I know, sensible, good people who are nonetheless, anti-vaccine.
right,
Yeah, not necessarily a whole big conspiracy theory. They're just reluctant to take the vaccine because they're
right,
unsure. So, in this, probability comes in really well. And, with the rationalization, we can rationalize for or against the vaccine fairly easily.
right,
All right, if you go a little bit deeper, it becomes harder to do it anti. And when we start to look at probabilities, you say, well, okay, how many people have been vaccinated? And I don't have to take anybody's statistics. I can go down to my local supermarket
right,
and just sit there outside the clinic, the pharmacy, and watch,
right,
and see people coming in, and okay, you extrapolate that to every day, and you see, wow, this is a lot of people, and then you think, well, this is a problem. These guys are putting their business on the line,
right,
right? So, the probability as now starts to get escalate higher and higher. Plus, I say, hey, all my friends who are vaccinated, no problem. Plus, those are people I know directly, that I contact with and chat with, which
right,
is, a fair amount. Then, if I take my extended friends, Facebook friends, people I don't chat with on Messenger, I just know them through Facebook, but they posting, I got vaccinated, I got vaccinated.
mhm,
So, if any of them had a problem, you'd see it.
right,
So, when you start to add the probabilities up of this being a problem, it's like, it starts to get smaller, smaller, smaller.
hmm,
Now you look at it from the other side, and you say, well, what is the probability that you correct that the vaccine is what? A problem, an infection, what is your actual argument here against
right,
the vaccine? Is there some contamination in some plot, whatever? If this is true, then where's the evidence?
right,
So, when you look at it from this point of view, it's really interesting, how people get caught up in these rationalization bubbles. Ryan is a great example here.
right,
He's completely entrenched in it. And also, they rationalizing something which, like Ryan already said, like he made a comment on Bina's post there. He says, I may be wrong.
Mm.
He knows that he may be wrong. It's very clearly evident that he may be wrong, but he's painted himself into a corner. So
Mm-hmm.
he persists in the rationalizations in order to justify this perpetuation of mistakes that he's been making.
Right.
So yeah, I guess he's sort of gradually extracting himself, but it's difficult for him without losing face. And he's been profoundly, deeply wrong before, and he's loath to repeat this, where he's
Right.
really been completely and utterly, humble faced. Yeah. So, or egg faced. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing, when we look at this, the power of rationalization, and particularly if we start to look at the rationalizations for rationalization. Like in
Mm-hmm.
Ryan's case, it's to avoid the awful truth, to
Right.
avoid losing face, to avoid being wrong, to avoid once again proving that you make profound mistakes. You jump in, you commit to things. He's making the exact same mistake that he's made before,
Right.
multiple times.
Right.
So it's astonishing when we look at that, and this is, to me, the virtue and value of impeccability.
Mm-hmm.
It prevents us from rationalizing rationalization.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Very,
that's
very
interesting.
powerful. Now we take it a little further. All right, so we already touched on the sacredness of probability or statistics. To me, that's really a huge deal because I have to deal with uncertainty. I know I'm likely to be incorrect in the great big picture because I don't have full information. However, I can minimize my risks, right, through assessing probability as best I
Right.
can. And furthermore, to just take things through to the end, to say, okay, I've got the multiple options here. Usually you sort of got a pair of them, either or, but okay, sometimes there's more. Like in the case of the vaccine, it's very clear, either or. Say, okay, if it is so, what happens? If it isn't so, what happens? And go all the way
Right.
to the
Right.
practicality of it. That's very, very powerful. Because if it is all, like Ryan said, well, we're being told it's a virus, but this is not necessarily true. All right. So if this is true, Ryan, that means that everybody's lying to me. Every doctor who's got a
Right.
microscope who
Right.
put this thing under the, seriously, how many people do you now have to convince for this?
Right.
The probability of this is very, very low.
Well, and to
Sorry.
me, this is the same, and I mean, it's the same group of people for the most part, but this is the same argument of like the world being flat.
Exactly.
People
Exactly.
legitimately believing that like science for the
Very
last
true.
however long we've known that the earth is round has
At
been
least
lying to
Ryan
us.
has given up on the flat earth thing. He's not, I don't know if he still personally believes it or not, but he was kind of pushing it once upon a
Was
time.
he really? Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what fascinates me, right? The flat Earth, it goes by the to me at least, when I really observe the psychology, it goes with that one-step logic of trusting my senses.
Right.
But I see the world to be flat. How can it
Right.
be?
Right.
And so now you explain why, and you go all this, and it gets a little bit complicated, and then they bail because they feel stupid in they struggle with the complexity, and they don't even want to get into the complexity because they have this conditioned reflex that anytime complexity comes on, it triggers them in their feeling stupid because they
Right.
struggled with stuff like this at school, and they were told they were stupid and punished for it, etc., etc. So they have a big resistance to it. But yet, when you look at least the thing that Ryan shared with me some guy on YouTube with a channel, the complexity of his explanation was one of the most complex explanations I've ever seen. Right?
Wow.
Astonishing, yeah. So, but he starts off using supposed facts. Look on the NASA thing, on the NASA, and then
Mhm.
of course, if you persist a little carefully, it all sounds perfectly reasonable in the beginning, but you have to persist and look at the change. Where it's now he's asking you to believe him. Where he quoted facts before and he's built up his credibility now, and then it's more and more and more, and eventually it's absurd. So it's very fascinating, the manipulation
Yes.
of
Yes.
logic and rationalization. That's real classic, fantastic, absolute manipulative rationalization.
Hmm.
It's really fantastic. And the ignoring the obvious truths of the thing. You know,
Right.
if it is flat, where the edges. And it's just all the stuff. It's
Right.
just it's astonishing how they will go to and they'll have these fantastic explanations to rationalize and justify it. Hey, dude, it is so much simpler just to follow the actual scientific logic of it.
Right. Right.
So I also look for simple explanations. I say, look, if you don't understand how this works, just go down to the sea at some point, right,
Right.
and
Right.
watch the ship leave, right? Especially if you can get lucky, one that's got a nice tall mast to it,
Right.
and see what happens, and then you can very clearly figure out, there's a curve here.
Right.
So it's
And
there are simple ways to do this.
it is really fascinating to me that there seems to be, and I'm really curious why. I told you I was listening to this podcast that's kind of talking about the history of doubt and sort of doubting the government, doubting science. How did we get to this point? And I'm really interested to see the conclusion that this person comes to. But I think it's fascinating the culture. It seems to me to be especially pervasive in America. Maybe that's just my personal experience, but it seems like America is a hotbed for this sort of culture of like looking for and expecting that everybody is lying to you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know why, I'm really curious as to how we got to this place. Like, why is it that we have such a large population of people who go to such extreme lengths to look for evidence of some giant conspiracy? Like, it's like everything is a conspiracy and everybody is lying to you. And there's this gigantic movement of
Yeah.
people who are hoodwinking you or whatever. That's so interesting to me. I'm so curious how that came to be and how we got to this place where we have.
uh, Russian subversion.
Mm,
Now, look at this logic. So, this is the magic of conspiracy theories, that at least once in a while something is true. Now, is Russia's uh, 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 aggression or antipathy or opposition to America, is this a conspiracy theory or is this a known fact?
seems
I'm not
in fact to me. I mean,
exactly. However, they conspire to be negative towards America. I mean, this
right,
is not much of a stretch here.
right.
So when we look at this, especially if we understand the history of America, I mean of Russia, it's very important to really be aware of this, to understand the Russian mentality and mindset. I saw something, a quote in a book today. The guy said that to be Russian is a part of the identity of a Russian. It's akin to I forget how they phrased it, but they said it's so built into them that you cannot separate Russian from a Russian; they would die. You know,
Wow,
I
interesting.
know. I'm paraphrasing. They didn't say that, but that was the point they made. So to be Russian is a very, very, very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at Soviet era Russian propaganda, and you listen to people who were in it, that how they bought into it, how they were so proud of their country, and Yuri Gagarin and all the science, all of this stuff, it totally overrode the reality of having empty shelves in the
Mm,
supermarket, things like that. The pride in the country, being a world leader, and being, to them, they were number one in the world, right?
right.
At that time, during the Cold War era. So there are many people still around in Russia in power, like Putin, who were deeply part of that. Putin was KGB, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that he grew up on. The fall of Russia, from a BMN point of view, psychologically, is devastating,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely
Mm-hmm.
devastating. That this the West, who they saw as weak and as corrupt and as weak, from a sense of, not weak in the sense of having military power, but weak in the sense of their character
Mm-hmm.
weakness,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is what they so bother them, the indulgent West. and they have no morals, they have no ethics, they have no strength of character. This is the thing that really got them down. Not that they were conquered by a superior military force. That would have been okay and acceptable. If you've got this tough conqueror, all right, I can deal with that. But no, to be conquered by indulgent, immoral, weak people, this is unacceptable, right? So now, of course, that's all total BS, because their version of strength is to be a superior criminal.
Right.
But
Right.
nonetheless, this is the Russian mindset and
Hmm.
character, and it's part of the psyche of the population, right? That's been reinforced and re-entrenched through the Soviet propaganda, and all the the Marshall type propaganda that's been pushed in. So it's a very big deal. Now you couple this with what happened in that collapse with the rise of the oligarchs, right?
Hmm.
So now you see all these oligarchs essentially in the chaos that ensued. They said, hey, I get to just through my will seize control, and I have power and control and wealth, right? So all of those oligarch billionaires came about through simple, direct theft and claim, through
Wow.
essentially gumption, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
fantastic, right? Through through the embrace and manipulation of chaos, right? They said, well, in
Right.
chaos, hey, I took it on me, and so it becomes a self-justifying thing. I organize stuff. I save the day. I mean, the classic case is of Alusa. The aluminium, a big, huge
Oh.
aluminium factory, right? It was complete chaos, and the guy's name I forget now. He was very involved with the Trump stuff. He's a very front and center oligarch. He was just a foreman, and he just organized thugs, and he started putting people in. It was complete and utter chaos in the place.
Right.
The place would have just collapsed, and it would have gone to nowhere. So he just, as this foreman, basically put the thugs and said, do this, do that, and started to seize control. And eventually he claimed ownership of this, which fascinates me,
Mm.
right? He just claimed ownership of it, this $1 billion thing, and there you go, it's mine now. And well, come and try and say
Wow.
different, right? Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. It's not the only story like this. So now we look at all of these elements put together, that you have this psychology in power, right? An
Hmm.
absolute psychology. Plus, they are
Uh-oh.
still,
Well,
as BMNs, their pride is still deeply associated to Russian supremacy.
mhm.
Right. So now you don't have the economics in order to fight a war. You don't have the military strength in order to fight a war. You know this is self-defeating. So how do you use this enemy? And the way that they clicked onto it is to use their weakness against them.
There we go. Sorry, it was delayed there, so
Right.
just
Right. So according to them, a free press is a ridiculous weakness.
okay.
So their ability to come on the internet and say whatever they like
Mhm.
and run ads and use the algorithm to where you have a fear to uh, uh, aggravate that fear, like fear of immigration, you
Right.
aggravate it. And this distrust of authority, you're
Mhm.
free to say distrust authority, you're free to push this out there, right? And so they push all of these things which they see as a fantastic weakness in the system. The freedom, in other words, of America, they see as a weakness, and they're exploiting that.
Mhm.
So
Interesting.
all of these conspiracy theories, anti-establishment, the vaccine thing, which divides the country, which weakens it, it's all part of the same logic. And when you look at that GUR memo, which I don't even think it was leaked, as far as I remember when I saw it, because it just kind of came and went. It was actually released by the GUR, where they mention all of their strategies for weakening America, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And one of them is to do all of these various things that I've said:
Wow. Yeah.
addition, subversion. I mean, they laid it all out there. And anybody with half a brain, in terms of understanding how to understand propaganda, really, because this all
Right.
falls under propaganda,
Right.
and really it falls under sedition and subversion.
Mhm.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's so easy in America to do this
Right.
because you've got a bunch of arrogant people who just believe whatever in one step logic. So they absolutely easy to manipulate.
Right.
Look at the anti-vaccine thing. they are taking the key element in American psychology, my freedom, my independence of choice, right? Because this is the American psyche looks at themselves as the independent rebel, right?
Right.
I mean, that's sort of, the blue jeans wearing, I'm a rebel, I'm an
Right.
independent, do
Right.
my own thing. So they use this to exploit this when it comes to being anti establishment, anti
Hmm.
so, in the anti-vaccine, it is all sorts of stuff that you can really push on this and to feed into this. You use fear on the one side, but you're pushing into this factor of, hey, but it's my freedom of
Right.
choice,
Right.
which is the American deal. But in the bigger picture, you are making people a nonconformist and anti-establishment and going against the grain and working against authority, which brings down your system,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
is fantastic. It's genius. It's
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
so, I mean, this, when you look at it in this context, you start to see stuff happen. And now, when you say, yeah, but where's the support? You look at all the troll farms, for instance, where they have, dozens and dozens of people who are sitting their whole entire job every day is to just push out misinformation.
Right.
So, it's not me coming up with stuff that's just, well, like my own conspiracy theory. There's very much fact and data to support the stuff. Plus, if you spend any time online in forums or in chat groups or even in the games, initially they were just when trolls came about. I remember trolls because they started in the games, right?
Right.
Where they would just stir up trouble. We were just basically BMNs who like to hurt people.
Right.
But
Right.
then, I think someone somewhere started to click, hey, you know what? I can use the same mechanism to just cause trouble. And
Right.
then it started to spread into non-gaming stuff,
Right.
where
Right.
they were now deliberately stirring stuff up. And
Yeah.
you'll see like in comments on, say something like the Rachel Maddow's Facebook page. You see in the comments, right? People will stir up stuff that's obviously designed to cause some kind of aggravation and resentment. And now people are starting to click. They'll say, go home, Russian troll, weak and lame. But initially, that stuff had real influence.
Right.
So what really amuses me, the irony of the conspiracy theorists, is that they are actually the victims
Right.
of a conspiracy theory.
Right. Right.
It's too fascinating.
Absolutely.
Like one
Well,
guy was going on with like an anti-vaccine guy, and I forget. I almost never respond to it, but there was some particular reason for it. So I made a comment, and he was going on about confirmation bias, and I said,
hmm.
"You are the consequence of
Right.
all this, all
Right.
your conspiracy theories, all your manipulation. You, the one that is actually the
Yes.
consequence of it. You, the beneficiary of it. It's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating."
That reminds me, I meant to send this to you. I was going to try to figure out how to send this to you the other day, and then I got distracted, but I'll show you. I'll share my screen. This was so fascinating.
Go see.
Um, I saw this post. I don't, oh, I think somebody that I follow shared it in their stories. And this was so interesting to me. First of all, I had never heard of this community or this term as a thing at all. And so it was interesting that, this is apparently a really big thing and I had never heard of it. But it was I think I saw this right after we had our big conversation about conspiracy theory and stuff the other day. And this is such a perfect example to me of BMN logic and how it gets turned into conspiracy stuff.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Okay, let me share my screen.
And in the bigger picture, I feel the world we live in right now, all the conspiracy theories, all of this stuff, it is to force awareness, discernment, and understanding.
Right, right. I agree. I
It's
agree.
brilliant. Everything I've learned about incels. What's
Yeah.
incel?
Okay. So this person who's made this is a post on Instagram. She is an artist who she is a feminist. She's like a very outspoken feminist. And so she makes drawings and things that are, some of them are feminist and some of them are just like sort of regular everyday drawings about experience, whether you're a man or a woman. But she has garnered a lot of attention from anti-feminist communities because she does these drawings. And so so she said she was getting trolled. She might say it in this first post. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, first of all, I had never heard the term incel. Never heard that. I had no idea
Yeah.
what this was. So, in 2018, I started uploading cartoons about sexism to Instagram. My following grew and my page was shared to a men's rights subreddit.
Uh-oh.
Since then, I've had lots of trolls, a majority of which are incels. I recognize them immediately. They have a really distinct and unique dialect. But most of the incels I encountered were aged 16 to 23, which worried me, which that is frightening. I decided to learn about the incel community, so I did an internet deep dive. I joined several incel subreddits, and 18 months later, this is what I've learned. So fascinating. There's so much. Okay, so yeah, incel means involuntary celibate.
Interesting.
Man, isn't
Interesting.
this I'm telling you,
Interesting.
this is,
In other words, hard up, guys.
yes, this is so fascinating. And it's so fascinating to see how this ideology develops, starting with I cannot get any female attention. And
Yes.
because I don't want to face the awful
Yes.
truth, I have now turned this into this conspiracy about how
Yes.
all women are out to get me and
Yes.
all women are
Yes.
horrible. It's
Yes.
so
Yes.
fascinating.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
so
this is
fascinating.
exciting. Let me connect this whole triangle
Okay.
here.
Okay.
So we started with rationalization, right?
Yes.
So the incel, to me, I look at them as, I think we mentioned this once upon a time, the superfluous males and the superfluous
Right.
male psychology. It's
Right.
the same thing. So now I'm a superfluous male connected to superiority paradigm, unwilling to accept that I am superfluous
Yeah.
and I need to rationalize
Yeah.
my superfluity and
100%.
excuse it and justify it,
Yeah.
rationalize that I am not the king of the alpha male. In other
Yeah.
words,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. It's so
And
fascinating.
this is the original trolls on the games. They were
Mm,
incels. They were
yeah.
superfluous
Yeah.
males
Yeah.
who were so, because typically they were very good at some part of the game, typically player versus player, right? So they would crow about how superior they are, how wonderful, and how crap you are, and all this stuff. And it was just perpetual. And it was like, Jesus, guy, you're on this platform, on the chat that everybody can see all day long, going on about just how superior you are. And
Right.
it's like, really, if you're now not, crowing about your inferiority complex,
Right.
then seriously, it was fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
The original trolls. Yeah.
Yeah. This was so fascinating, and
Keep going, keep going, keep
it's
going.
such an interesting peek into a very specific community that has sort of evolved out of superiority paradigm and superfluous male, this what you said about sort of refusing to accept your place in the hierarchy, but instead of that being a good thing, turning that into this rationalization nonsense that's just totally crazy. So yeah, so incel is involuntary celibate, a man usually young whose identity is defined, which that was an interesting thing to me. Their entire identity is defined by their lack of sexual experience with women. He blames women and society for this.
You remember Beavis and Butthead?
Yes, yes, Beavis and Butthead. Yep,
They were classic incels.
perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is interesting too, and fits right with the whole rationalization, not accepting your
Yes.
place.
Yes.
Incels hate some men too. Chads are conventionally attractive men who have sex with women. A Chad is an alpha male, muscly, top of the social hierarchy.
There you go. Yeah.
Incels believe looks and genetics determine your success with women. They call it lookism.
In other words, luck.
Right, right.
Right?
Luck of the draw.
That's the out. They
Yes,
always in these things.
has
There's
nothing
the
to do with
justification, the
me. Right,
rationalization.
right,
Luck. It's luck. It's not
right,
my fault.
right. And that the top 80% of women are selectively dating only the top 20% of men. This is called hypergamy.
Yeah. Or maybe I think it's hypergamy. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I was thinking because, like, polygamy, monogamy.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Hypergamy. Yes.
Um,
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Not because I
so
thought, the fact that they have like lots of game,
right,
this is a
right,
hyper game.
right.
Because I'm relating it to the gamer logic. Because
It's,
typically
yeah,
these are
it's
on
quite
Reddit.
possible.
It says a lot of gaming involved in. But
It's
yeah, it could be both. It could be both. Interesting. Interesting.
so, and then Stacy is the female version of Chad. She's hot but shallow and a gold digger. The Chad and Stacy memes are both blonde and blue-eyed. Incels and the alt-right cross over a lot. Also fascinating to me.
Yeah. So look at the Stacy. Look
Yes.
at the justification and rationalization of a Stacy.
Yep.
Shallow and a gold digger. That's the only reason they'll go for a
Yep.
Chad.
Yep.
Right? Not
Yep.
because the Chad has got something, of value
Right.
in it. What
That's the only reason that she's not interested in me, right? Because she's just shallow. Yeah. It's
the same logic I give to fat women or fat girls who are worried about their looks, right?
right. Right.
Any girl who's concerned with their looks, whether it's now usually it's because they think they're too fat or whatever. I say, please, 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 just look at find a large city newspaper that shares wedding notifications.
Right. Right.
Right? And look at wedding pictures. I mean, Olivia used to be really involved in the wedding business, right?
Oh wow.
And yeah, yeah, I mean, she used to go every weekend and go and do a wedding or two, as part of the DJing and the music and all that. Anyway, and and she will tell you that this ideal of the beautiful bride, one in, I don't know, 20 or 30 or whatever, is this typical classic thing. The rest are all bridezillas pretty much.
Right. Right.
Ordinary typical people, not particularly attractive, and yet they're getting married. So I recommend the same thing, with this nonsense with the Chad and all this. Dude, look at the guys who are actually getting freaking
Yes.
married,
Yes.
and look who they're getting married to.
Yes.
I mean, come on,
That's the other thing that regularly, and this is so horrible. Actually, mom and I have both talked about this, and this is horrible to say, but really, I see this all the time. You see these absolutely beautiful women
Yeah.
getting married to totally like, I'm not like completely unattractive men, but not
but appalling individuals. If you meet them, they're even more unattractive.
right. And you're like, okay, this is bizarre. Like clearly, this whole
Mismatch.
idea of like Chads and all this is not
not.
happening because there are men that are pulling way above their.
So this again brings me back to this profound strategy of actualization. Look at actually what's going on. Does
Right.
your theory actually hold up?
Right.
No, it doesn't. When I look at guys that get married, and more guys get married than not, so the majority of men get married,
Right. Right.
this doesn't hold up, dude. It just
Right.
does not hold up. Sorry.
Absolutely. I agree. Okay. Incels group themselves by what pills they've taken, aka what level of extremism they subscribe to. The pill
Ah,
system is inspired by the Matrix.
yeah.
The blue pill is least extreme, red pill, and then black pill most extreme. Normie.
Because she says, honestly, I have no idea why. Why is the Matrix so
Yeah.
potent?
Yes. But no, it makes total sense because the Matrix was waking up from the giant conspiracy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, Neo is the one. It's an
Sorry.
anagram of
Hang
one.
on just a
So
second.
it is an ordinary guy who's special.
Hi. Okay, perfect. Okay. 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 Sounds good. Okay, awesome. 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 Yeah, yeah, that should be fine. Okay, thank you so much. Bye. Okay. Sorry.
So I was just saying that I'm getting food as well. I'm just saying that this is the great myth or the belief or the hope that I am in some way special and undiscovered. Look, it's the same logic as all the superhero comics, right? They all
Right,
started off as this nobody, and then something miraculous happened, and they
right,
became the superpower.
right,
It's the same thing, But in the Matrix, it's the same logic, really.
right,
That wish and hope, that magic of transformation, that you become special
right,
suddenly.
right. Yeah. Okay, normies like you and me are blue pilled. We're ignorant to the world, to the real world, and follow mainstream feminism. Being red pilled is waking up to the truth. Female oppression is a myth, and men are really the most oppressed. The red pill ideology isn't exclusive to incels. It appears a lot in the manosphere. I love that term.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool too. And again, this is avoidance of the awful truth.
Right,
Dude, wake up. I mean, seriously, as men, we've been really shitty to women for centuries.
right,
They don't want to acknowledge this. They don't want to say, but
right,
I haven't. Well, I haven't been shitty to women.
right,
No, but that doesn't mean that men in general. So I don't identify with men. Don't be calling me a typical guy. Thank you very
right,
much. No,
right.
I don't even identify as a man. I identify as a person,
Yeah,
as a sentient being. And
yeah,
I've always, ever since a kid, I looked at women in the same way. If you can think, what difference does it matter what body you're in?
right.
It's irrelevant because, okay, so you crippled or a paraplegic doesn't make your brain any different. And if you can think, it doesn't matter what sex you are, you can
Yep,
think. Right? Logic is sexually independent.
right,
It's species independent for that reason too.
right.
Especially meta logic and meta reason. Don't matter who you are,
I agree.
where you come from. So I never had that. To me, it just made no sense
Yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah, I agree. Okay, and then the black pill is the system is broken. Conventionally attractive people will succeed at life, and incels will suffer forever. Either you LDAR, lie down and rot, or you turn to violence. And it says
Wow.
the black pill was the ideology of the Plymouth attacker.
The black bull. Sorry, go back one, please. Sorry.
The black pill was the ideology of the Plymouth attacker. I don't know who that is, but someone who must have tried to kill
One
people.
of the mass violence people.
Yes,
That's interesting. The
yeah,
black pill is a new twist on this that
right.
I haven't seen. I've known about the blue pill, the red pill, but
Black pill is like the extremism level.
to justify it exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
quite fascinating.
Okay. The history.
Sorry, there was one point that came up in the previous one. Can you go back one more that
Yeah.
I wanted to share? Um, Ah, ah. In terms of this, that the whole world is for conventionally attractive people.
Right.
I mean, seriously, where does Trump fit into that?
Right. Yep, it's true.
You know,
It's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. I know. And I find it interesting that I don't think anywhere in this is money ever mentioned.
yeah,
So, that's interesting to me that clearly incel ideology does not account for someone like Trump, who is pulling way above his pay grade in terms of marrying an incredibly attractive woman solely because he has money and power. That's not discussed. Really, the only thing that they focus on is
right.
what.
But there's a reason for it. Sorry, I knew there was more to this here. There's a logic to this. Why the black pill is the out? Because if you bring money into it, then you say, hey, but money can be made by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, Bill Gates.
Right,
He's
right,
was not, look, when you look at him as a young man, he's just a basic nerd. He was
right,
definitely not a Chad.
right,
Absolutely
right,
not a Chad, right? Most of the billionaires were whatever they call them, I forget the word now, right? um what's the incels? I guess they were all incels. They were all nerds, really.
right, right,
I mean, the modern crop of billionaires. There's very few in the old school. Now, Bill Gates was very clever. He employed a Chad. He's CEO of
right,
Microsoft. All through those years, Steve Ballmer is a very absolute typical Chad, right?
right,
He's this big guy, tough guy. But nonetheless, he got his start, and he was a long time. He was totally, an incel. So the point here I'm making is that They cannot bring money into it, because money, you can't say money is based on your looks, because the nerds are making money.
Right.
But they're not nerds, they're stupid. And they don't want to bring money in, because now this is going to say, yeah, but you know what? You have to work, you have to make effort, you
Right.
have to have some
Right.
brains, and that's it. No, they
Right.
don't want to go there. They don't want to go there, because that's too awful a truth, and one they cannot justify and rationalize.
Yeah.
So this black pill is your way out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, even in the Matrix, the pill was the way out,
Right.
right?
Right.
So this introduction of the black pill is the way out.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Okay, so the history of incels. In 1997, a woman who was lonely and struggled to make romantic connections set up this website as a support network, and it was Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project. She,
Oh,
she,
the irony,
oh yeah, yeah,
too
right,
unbelievable.
right,
I just, to me, when I see this, sorry, I love it, because to me it's the universe.
yes,
It's the universe saying, look,
right,
just
right,
wake up, for
right,
Christ's sake. I mean,
right, right.
seriously, come on, at some point when you wake up from this, some angel or whatever is going to
Right,
smack the hell out of you and
yeah.
say, you didn't get all of this. Come on, seriously, and you're going to
Whole
just
thing, yeah, the whole thing was started by a woman, and they took this and then turned it around into this ridiculous thing. So it says, yeah, she started a website set up as a support network for people who were struggling with romantic connections, and she abbreviated Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project to Incel in the description.
Interesting, not Ansel, for Alana.
Well, for involuntary,
I guess involuntary. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. In 2000, Alana left the site. Over time, the term incel was hijacked and given its new meaning. And then she has a drawing for the manosphere in the bottom. And it says the manosphere is a term that groups together all of these online communities. There's the community of pickup artistry. There's MGTOW, which is men going their own way.
Men what their own way? Sorry?
Men going their own way.
Going their own way.
Then there's the men's rights group, and then incels. And all of those groups make up the manosphere. And she says it's existed for ages, and incels are the most extreme of the bunch in the manosphere.
Yeah, very interesting.
And then, yes, then she has a slide about NEETs, NEET, NEETs, Doomers, and the alt-right. And she says, NEET, I think she talks about this more in the bottom. NEET stands for not in any education, employment, or training. Wow. So basically, you're not in school, you're not employed, you're not training for anything, you're just like existing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you in other words, what in the old days you would call a classic screw up.
Right, right. And it says, she has a note at the bottom that says, lots of incels and doomers are meats. So a lot of people who make up the incel community are screw ups. And it says, incels, doomers, and the alt-right are like brothers of the same family. Doomers are young men, usually, who are depressed, defeatist, and isolated. They might have an addiction and have a kind of we're all going to die anyway attitude. It's worth being familiar with all these groups, as the people involved can have all three identities or escalate from doomer to incel or alt-right. And then she has a graphic about somebody named Elliot Rodger, and it says Elliot Rodger was a 22-year-old man who killed 6 and injured 14 in 2014. Before the attack, he uploaded a YouTube video outlining his motive. He said that he wanted to punish women for rejecting him and sexually active men because he was jealous. He also published a manifesto where he mentions a hatred.
Fascinating.
Yeah. He also published a manifesto where he mentions a hatred for interracial couples. This attack is what made people
Hmm.
aware of incels. And it says the phrase going ER or Elliot Roger is used by the incel community to reference an attack. And then
Interesting. Interesting.
this is a really interesting part of this story to me in relation to the whole propaganda discussion and like using the internet, using social media to sort of unknowingly spread this sort of propaganda message. And so she talks about how the meme Pepe. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. She's got pictures of him here. He's like a frog. It's something that I've seen a lot of times.
I haven't seen it. No.
Pepe is a really common meme just in general, but
Yeah.
apparently the incel community and the alt-right community have sort of hijacked Pepe and made him their like mascot. And they spread a bunch of memes that are alt-right and incel related that are Pepe, they spread a bunch of like Pepe memes
Yeah.
that are sort of sometimes, I mean, I think sometimes obviously alt-right and incel related and sometimes not so much.
Yeah. It's the same. It's the same mindset. The alt-right are also coming from this deep inferiority.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
typically because they are, uneducated
Right.
and shallow in terms of their thinking. They're very basic in their logic, and they identify, at least internally in their psychology, as feeling stupid in the
Right.
world.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's no real different. Yeah,
Yeah.
because these incels are clearly not nerds, right?
No. Yeah. I mean, I think they're more what
Yeah.
I would typically categorize from middle school days as like losers, you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
A
Oh,
nerd,
they classic losers.
a
Absolutely.
nerd, a nerd
Absolutely.
to me
Yeah.
was someone who was really smart.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And to
And
me,
the
these guys,
nerds were picked on
right,
by, the jocks
right,
because the insecurity because of, the nerds were smart. And
right.
so if the nerds were just, I'll leave them alone if
These
they weren't
guys,
smart.
these guys are the people who don't have smarts and don't
Right.
have looks
Correct.
and
Correct.
don't have any particular ambition or motivation. So they just,
Right. They have nothing, in other words.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so and she's got the Pepe meme here. So she says Pepe is one of the most commonly used memes by the alt-right and incels. And she has an example of sad or crying Pepe, which is
Yeah.
used a lot by incels, and then neat Pepe, so not in any education, employment, or training Pepe. And he, in this picture, he's wearing a blanket because he's at home unemployed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then alt-right Pepe doing an OK sign like this, which apparently is an alt-right symbol.
Ah,
Did
interesting.
not know that.
In Brazil, it's a root sign.
I did know that. So then she says how the patriarchy comes into play. We see these as a product of the patriarchy. So challenges young men face pressure to be hypersexual, loneliness and isolation, not asking for help, body image insecurities, and lack of mental health support and resources. So
Yes. Yes.
she's got over on the left, we see these as a product of the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Incels see these as a problem caused by women.
Of course, they have to. They have to, yeah,
Right.
because it's all the justification.
Right.
We can look at this in two ways also, as a cult of loneliness and as a cult of inferiority.
Right. Right.
But the loneliness is the driving factor here, and I would posit from a kind of a future science fiction point of view, sex robots.
Right.
The necessity for sex robots would change this whole logic.
Probably true. Yep. Probably very true. Okay. And then how this has shaped the incels' view of women. First, seeing encounters with women as transactional, aka I complimented her, I opened the door for her. Why won't she go on a date with me?
Yeah, yeah.
Victim,
Oh, I took her to dinner and she didn't want to put out.
right, right. Victimhood. I was a nice guy. Hot girls are just bitches. Normalizing violence against women, and then thinking they're entitled to sex just because they're men.
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay, and then
Which, I mean, that's a DNA imperative.
right,
If
right,
you look at all of our animal, and they totally apply this.
yes, absolutely, 100%, 100%.
If you look at any primate society, rape is just part of the deal, or horses, or lions, or
Right,
whatever, any
right.
group. That's it.
Yep. Okay, and then
At
why?
least horses, because horses, you don't have a disparity in size.
Right,
Male, female, same.
right,
If the female is not in heat, she'll kick the hell out of that
right,
stallion.
right. Absolutely.
And dolphins, the females make groups
Mm-hmm.
to protect themselves against rape from males. It's
Right,
quite fascinating.
right,
So what really intrigues me with this, or just a little side point here, is that people romanticize animals, wolves or dolphins or whatever.
right,
Just go actually be one. You're going to experience this a little differently,
right,
right? Now, if you're an incel, I get freely to rape the woman. All right, great, But if you're the woman, you're not going to think it's so cool.
right,
Or if you have even in the male, you're going to have direct bullying hierarchy. You're going to be at the bottom of that pecking order.
yep,
So yeah, you may find that even though you technically could go and rape the guy above you in the pecking order is going to push you aside
right,
and claim it for you. You're still going to get nothing.
right. It's true.
In
And
other words, it's a horrible existence, really.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, then this is talking about why it's a terrorism threat. Rough criteria to define a terrorist group.
Yeah.
Using violence in the name of a political, religious, or ideological cause. And she says,
Yeah.
with incels, there have been at least 12 gun and knife related attacks since the year 2000, referencing the incel ideology.
Interesting.
Another criteria is these acts or threats of acts aren't committed by the government or people in power. And with incels, they are being committed by young men. Third, the violence is aimed at a large proportion of the population. And with incels, it's aimed at women specifically,
Yeah.
but also chads and people
Yep.
who conform. So literally the entire population.
Yep. Everybody who's not an incel. Absolutely.
Right.
No.
Right. And then this is
So also, sorry, why violence as a means?
oh
That's
yeah.
the same thing. All the terrorists, right? All the Taliban, all these ISIS, all of them. They all suffer from the same nonsense, right?
Right.
In some degree or other. Violence is equated with manliness,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that's why they take violence as the route for their ends rather than other means to achieve their ends, right? Because violence proves you're a man.
Right.
Yeah, it was my big complaint against Nelson Mandela, that he refused to say violence is not a legitimate means to political end.
Well, and to
Because in his
me,
culture, it's totally connected and related. In the Russian culture, absolutely as well.
that's to me, just from the superiority paradigm as a whole, violence is the ultimate means of achieving power.
Yep, yep,
You know,
yep.
if you, I mean, that's how you overpower your enemy is by beating the crap out of them, killing them, or whatever.
Right. But violence is not seen in this culture as something that, hey, you're just more violent. You're just more skilled at being violent, which, okay, that could be useful in a soldier or a criminal or whatever. But it's not something that as a civilized human being that
Right.
I think is a valuable property. But they do see it because they equate it with manliness, which is a character issue you, right? So the more you are to be violent, the more manly you are, which means in their logic, the more character you have, like a knight or whatever,
Right.
all this is the same logic. You're all on the same scale. You're at the top of the pile because you're more civilized, you're more evolved, you're more superior, really.
Right.
It's fascinating
Yeah.
how that is equated. And you look at Trump. This is why Trump walks around with that ludicrous expression on his mouth.
Right.
The pretend tough guy. There's a famous picture of Mussolini standing, the
Yeah.
same pose. And Trump has been on the wrestling, the professional wrestling.
Yes.
You've seen those clips, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. It's the myth of I'm actually a tough guy.
Right.
It's fascinating how this is such an equation for this logic. It's so deep in the DNA. Violence makes you better,
Right. Absolutely.
makes you a better person.
Yeah. And then this was interesting.
I truly hope all these idiots get reincarnated as hyenas,
Yes.
as
Yes.
male hyenas,
Right. Absolutely. I agree. That would be
or
that,
male praying manti. Either way,
or like male lemurs,
yeah, or male black widows.
bottom of the pack. Yeah. Um, so this was interesting to me. She's showing sort of the scale of the manosphere, and she has pickup artistry over on the far left, and it says some ex-incels have said that this was their journey to radicalization. So they started in the pickup artistry community, then
Ah,
sort of got pulled into the men's rights community, then got pulled into the red pill slash men going their own way community. And she says, ideally, your friend, relative, people wouldn't be anywhere on the scale, but if they are, catch them before they get here. And then from there, you escalate to the black pill incel community.
wow, fabulous stuff.
So interesting. And yeah, what do we do now? Having an awareness of the language and memes is endlessly useful. It means you can spot if someone is engaging in the incel community. Yes, some incels are violent criminals, but just like some forms of religious extremism, many members are teens from vulnerable backgrounds or they've been groomed online by adults. Mental health support could stop them from progressing to violence. And keep challenging misogyny. The manosphere thrives on extremist misogyny, so kill it from the root.
Wow,
Super
wow,
interesting.
very cool. And this is the power of understanding the superiority paradigm. It all is just so simple. It's so clear. It's so obvious.
Absolutely.
And when we see this paradigmness of it, which perpetuates it, it really makes us realize we need a different paradigm.
Absolutely.
Very, very, very powerful. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. And of course, too, if you're looking to cause division and problems in a society, you just exploit these things.
Right. Right.
You justify, you rationalize, you go online. Nobody in their right mind would say, that's good. That makes sense,
Right.
right? And the incels, because they suffer from insecurity, aren't likely to start up a group like that.
Right.
But somebody who is exploitative absolutely does.
Yep.
Now, they're saying all of these deep thoughts and hopes, it's okay, it's fine. Yes, you are justified in being envious.
Right.
Oh, through queuing, you legitimize all of this.
Yeah.
And that's the real danger here, that you are legitimizing crappiness. Now,
Absolutely.
we see this in advertising too, by the way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All the time, your crappiness is being legitimized because, well, you're okay. And in movies too, it's the part of the same Rambo, Rocky logic.
Right.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating how Madison Avenue is a big, big, big criminal
Mhm.
in this. Not that intentionally, but they exploit this to say it's okay to be crappy. It makes people feel good. I don't have to make an effort to learn and grow. I'm okay as I am.
Right.
Crap and all. Yeah, fascinating.
Absolutely.
Really interesting. But I do feel that in this now, before it was completely hidden, Now it's coming out, and
Yeah.
there's an awareness of it and an understanding. And somebody doing some research may come across this woman's thing, an incel, and say, "Wow, there's another side to the picture." Something really interesting that I saw from an ex a neo-Nazi, right?
Mm,
So that he was, or white supremacist. Yeah, he was very involved in the white supremacy, and he was, he wasn't at the bottom anymore. He sort of moved up the ladder already, and then he got out. And he said, he just got caught up in this. But he said, here's the key thing: when I was recruited, I was just lonely.
mm,
They gave me somewhere I belonged. I would have joined anything. Didn't matter what it was. I couldn't care two hoots about their ideology. I just wanted to belong
right,
because I was profoundly lonely.
right.
And it's the same thing for these incels. Profoundly lonely. And
Absolutely.
when you understand that, you know, it changes, which is again, you bring your superfluous males. In times gone by, they would all be part of the army.
Mm,
When you look at most pre-technological societies, you got your bunch of warriors, and then you got everybody else. So all of the superfluous males would join the army, which gives them purpose, right?
right,
Makes them feel like they belong, which keeps the scrap out of it. And if you look at the eyes, it actually gives them expression for all of these the tendencies, the envy, the rage. You get to take it out on the enemy,
right,
which okay, works over there. It's channeled at least. But yeah, but when you in the army, lots of the management of the army is taking care of guys fighting between themselves, stealing from each
right,
other,
right,
sabotaging each other. It's terrible. It's horrible business. But nonetheless, at least it gives them some space. And like, but they really push this, the male honor and all this, like the Marines. They transform it into something at least a bit more sensible. Where
right,
they now bringing ethics and honor into it, not just I'm part of a gang. Which is the
right.
typical armies in history have just been, hey, I'm part of a gang, and that's it. It's
Absolutely.
managed superiority and pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
You know your place, your officers. There's only so much they can do to you. There's a restraint on it, so you at least feel a bit protected by the system. It's not just naked superiority, which you have no protection. I mean, like a lion. If the alpha lion kills one of the bottom ones, there's no consequence.
Right.
You don't even have to be the number one. You just have to anyway, and it doesn't matter. There's no comeback on you for it.
Yeah.
But in the army, you're not allowed to do that. So you at least have some safety in the system.
Right. Yeah.
But
It
there's
is.
no, because of the problem in our society, the armies have shrunk in percentage terms. So you still have this thing with superfluous males.
That is such a fascinating concept. I mean, I remember when you first mentioned superfluous males, and I had never thought about it in that context, but I mean, that is really fascinating. And I can see how that would be a really difficult concept to, if
Yeah.
if you sort of realized or came to an understanding that that was the case for you, that would be something really hard to
Oh,
accept, or to figure out what your place is or whatever.
and for me, the whole Chad thing. Sorry, I have no a Chad, because at least in my perception, Chad is not something to aspire to. They are manipulators, liars.
Right.
They typically not very nice to women. They lie, say whatever to get the woman into bed.
Right.
They're
Right.
just be a man's really. So that didn't that to me, that, oh, you got the skill of getting women into bed. This was a negative, not a positive. It
Right.
was a mark against you, not a
Right.
mark for you.
Right. Absolutely.
It's very interesting. Very interesting.
It is. Yeah. Super interesting.
And women are unfortunately a bit part of this, the whole bad boy thing and all of this.
Yeah.
They reward these freaking chats. I saw guys treat women horribly and they love them for it, or at least were very loyal to them for it, which fascinated me, this mindset. Well, because they do perpetuate some measure of uh, confidence, right? I'm
Right.
in charge. I can do. So that's better than a guy who's totally inept at doing anything.
Right.
Something that I figured out, what makes men attractive, really, really attractive,
Hmm.
isn't looks or money or anything. It's fatherability.
Oh, interesting.
So if you look at someone like Joe in that context, it's like, yes, absolutely, this is a number one pick right here.
Right.
This is top grade fatherability. Yes.
Right. Right.
So when you look at women's choices, you start to see that at
Hmm.
least, okay, the guy may be a jackass, but at least he'll provide. At least he's loyal to the family.
Right.
He's protective of his woman, and even if he's got multiple women, fine, he's still protective of his
Right.
harem or whatever. It doesn't matter. My children will be provided for.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. My happiness is irrelevant. My children will be provided for.
Right.
So you
Right.
can see where, the Chads who are BMNs, who are aggressive, but at least they take action. At least
Right.
they have some measure of independence, right? And confidence. And typically, their success with women translates to some measure of success in the business world,
Mm-hmm.
or at least they hold a stable job usually, or whatever. So they aren't complete, absolute disasters.
Yeah.
Even if their provision comes from being a criminal, doesn't matter. They're still providing.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite fascinating. Or at least they create the illusion of providing.
Right.
A lot of women find out later on that, they don't and they won't and they're not loyal and they run away and then it's too late.
Right.
But the myth, at least, when you look at it in the context of fatherability, it changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing, men marry mothers.
Right.
They don't marry their mistresses.
Right. It's true.
Very interesting, right?
It is. It is. It's true.
To understand motivation, understand humans.
Yes.
When we look at psychology as motivation, it just becomes very simple, really.
It's true.
That was a scowl.
There was a really weird noise happening back there. I don't know what in the world.
It's just a good scowl. What the fuck? Yeah, it was WTF, like right there.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's fascinating, this stuff. It's really fascinating. Also, when you start to look at, resolution, it becomes even more interesting and more
Right.
tricky.
Right.
And the needs for awareness, discernment, and understanding.
Yes.
Now, what is the female equivalent of the incel?
I don't know. I don't know that there is a big enough community.
Well, the woman who started it, you know,
Right, but I don't know that there is a
it
violent.
hasn't it hasn't
Yeah,
become
I don't know that
formalized. Yeah,
it's escalated to
right. But I'm just saying that what the incels don't realize is, for every male that's sitting around feeling hopeless and unloved and whatever, without, there's an equivalent female out there.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
know.
I'm looking. Here we go.
Now, they don't get radicalized into violence like the men because it's not part of their DNA. But one wonders what. Let's put it this way. Well, let's call them the spinster brigade, right?
What?
Those women who do feel that they also feeling victimized because and insecure and inferior because of not being pretty, not being attractive, not
Mhm.
being smart. Same thing, like that woman who started the whole thing, right?
Right.
Uh, where are they and what are they up to? So for me, a remedy would be to put these two groups together.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is interesting. Someone asked on a forum, what's the female equivalent of an incel? And this person answered, while the term incel was invented by a woman named Ilana, however, if you pay attention to the current incel community, they will tell you that female incels do not exist, as any woman can find herself a partner, and that women live their life on easy mode. They will also,
Yeah,
they,
I saw this when I was a kid. that there's this belief that any woman can get sex anytime she wants.
Right. They will
Which,
also,
okay, there's probably some measure of truth to it, but not entirely.
right.
You know, I mean, I think even those hard up guys, if propositioned, might, well, no thanks.
Yeah.
But then
Says,
again, some of them are so hard up, it wouldn't matter. Oh, this reminds me of, I think I mentioned this to you before. Just a really classic scene in a movie that stuck out in my mind. So this middle-aged woman, not not obese, but she's not slim and slender, not entirely unattractive, but not in the usual scheme of things attractive. Like if she went into the bar in normal times, none of the guys in this particular bar would have hit on her. Right? But
mhm,
she walks into the bar and she slaps $100 on to the bar, and I forget what she says, but basically, first one who kind of comes and basically you have sex with me, the 100 is yours, right? But now, so all the guys in the bar are like, you know, kind of looking at each other. Uh, they tempted, but they don't want to acknowledge that they tempted because the woman isn't particularly attractive and a little bit older. They
right.
don't want to acknowledge that they're willing to do it, not just for the money, but also because they're hard up, right?
Hmm.
So this tension builds, and eventually the one guy at the bar lunges for it. And the moment he starts that lunge for it, everybody else, of course, does the same thing.
Nice.
And the tension is broken because he was the first one to say yes, and to basically acknowledge the truth. And it's brilliant scene, brilliant
Right.
scene. I wish I could remember what movie it was from, because there's so much subtlety in that scene, which is why it stuck with me. It was a very
Hmm.
sophisticated scene, genius. It was really awesome scene. And what made the woman so potent, that she was just, hey, I need to get laid. That's it. I'm quite fine with this. That's it. And she was completely a very had lots of independence of being, and she had no qualms. She was in charge there, which was the
Right.
other power
Right.
of it. They knew going into this that they weren't going in as the dominant male.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. She was the dominant one. It's fascinating. A really cool, really, really awesome scene. I don't know, maybe you could find it by research.
Yeah. Yeah.
You seem to be good at finding stuff like that.
Well, I do enjoy researching
Yeah.
things.
I'm impressed at your Google skills.
Well, thank you.
I feel that, this to me is something that I think that needs to be taught in school, in, junior school, as early as possible, how
Right.
to Google, how to search, because it does make a difference and it changes everything. If you know how to search, you get to filter all that massive information. It's an incredibly powerful skill, right?
Right. It is. It's true.
And it also forces you to think. It takes some critical thinking in order to refine your search terms and to
Hmm.
understand how things works. It's very, very cool, very, very powerful. Yum, 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 yum. Nice food. I had a ton of spam lying around, just
Oh, nice.
miscellaneous. I have no idea where it came from, and it didn't
Right.
quite have a place, so it was sort of standing odd. It's one of those things. Well, okay, I got it from somewhere, and you save it for when you you run out of whatever, right? It's like emergency food.
Right.
But so I decided to eat it before that time because I just wanted to get it out of the way, kind of. So I don't mind spam. I'm not wildly keen on it. It tastes nice, but somehow it's kind of rich for me. So I had it with something else. I forgot what I did with it, but so I had half of it left over. So I thought I'll make some rice, I'll make some gravy, and then chop the spam up into little blocks and put it in the gravy and
Hmm.
have it with the rice. And now the gravy, it took that richness of the spam out of it, and
Right.
it was very nice. It's very, very delicious. I've still got a couple of helpings left, so very nice. Anyway, we sidetrack. Oh, my spam is coming up now.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's interesting that spam, or at least we used to call it bully beef, was something that I grew up with. It was
Right.
a cheap meat, and
I
just
did too. We ate spam
yeah,
a lot.
yeah, and it got this poor bad reputation, and I don't even know if you can buy it anymore nowadays.
That's a good question. I
Or not
certainly.
easily. You can. It's still around, but it definitely is not part of everyday diet like
Right.
it used to
Right.
be. I mean, it was the cheapest possible meat you could find,
Right.
right?
We used to buy it canned and we would eat it on saltine crackers. I remember having that
Yeah.
snacks
Yeah.
all the time as a kid.
Or just on bread, you just spread on the bread,
We never had.
Or you'd have it like meatloaf with rice and gravy.
Right. See, we never. Yeah. So fine. I didn't even know that spam came in the like blocks
Yeah.
until I was an adult because somehow my grandma only ever bought it in the little
Ah,
tins.
why? Yeah. So I had one of those bigger cans,
Yeah. Yeah.
and when you take it out of there, it comes into this kind of
Right. Yeah.
squarish rectangle. Yeah. Very interesting. I don't know how come somehow spam is related to the incels.
Oh, I like
But,
it.
but I mean, at least in my understanding of girls, even attractive girls don't think they can have sex anytime with anyone.
Right. Right.
There are very few girls who do feel that way.
Yeah.
Very seldom. They don't. The guy's idea and the girl's idea, the psychology, the two don't correspond.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
It's really interesting. I mean, there's insecurity and inferiority, both sides of the spectrum, and not just at those who don't have boyfriends. It's across the board.
Right.
You don't see many confident people, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Truly confident people. It's just a rarity, and they don't realize that. And also the whole dating thing. If people were just a little bit more honest, and you had the freedom to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm interested in dating and not necessarily a relationship or getting married. Just having a bit of fun and just being upfront with it a little bit and being more honest, and then not being seen as creepy, just as seen as honest."
Right.
And you put your offer out there. Okay, you want to take it up or not? And now, if you go to the clubbing culture, it's there.
Mm.
Right. Now, the incels are not part of the clubbing culture,
Right.
but this freedom of sexual freedom and just doing it and no restrictions, and that's definitely part of that culture.
Right.
It's found expression there, hence its popularity. Really,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me. I would have thought that clubs would be a little bit more smart about it, instead of your get together place being the bathroom or the alley or whatever, that they would provide like hotel rooms,
Right.
where you rent them by the hour,
Right.
essentially, where, okay, hey, let's go upstairs, and this is part of your club. I
Yeah.
mean, that would make the whole thing so much more attractive, right?
Right.
And you've got a condom dispensing machine in every room and stuff like
Right.
this,
Right.
a basin and just basic stuff.
Yeah.
It's very simple. It's a very small room, but you got a basin and a toilet, and there you go, and maybe even a shower if you need to be.
Right.
At least a shower would be great. So now you really facilitating this thing and making it more sensible, and
Yeah.
you're satisfying a basic human need, which is a
Right.
big deal.
Right.
you know in our world. That's why I'm saying, sex robots will really change the dynamic.
True. That is very
Uh,
true.
Actual, that in what you see in the movies, where they look very realistic and human,
Right.
and I can tell you from guys I know, they don't have to be all that realistic. They'll be seriously,
Yeah.
it will satisfy that. It has to be more or less, at least it just create the illusion. Their minds will fill in the rest,
Right. Right.
and also the advantages involved, that you don't feel any guilt, you don't have any moral qualms,
Right.
you can just indulge yourself as much as you add,
Right.
and you don't feel like you're imposing yourself, which is a
Mm.
big problem for the superfluous male or the incel,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they are inhibited because they feel like they're imposing,
Right.
because they feel it's my need that I'm getting satisfied. There's no comprehension that, hey, the woman also has a need.
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't exist. So it's very one-sided, the psychology. So in terms of this logic, it would be a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at countries that have legal prostitution, like in the Netherlands, they've had
Mm.
it for ages,
Yeah.
and how they have seen the societal benefits of it to
Hmm.
consumers.
Yeah.
There is much, much, much to recommend.
Right.
I mean, they originally they started to say that it's there anyway. Let's manage it
Right.
for the sake of the woman. was the original logic, not for the guy's sake,
Interesting.
for the benefit of the woman. Because if it's illegal, there are pumps and there's abuse and diseases and all this.
Right.
If you want to be part of the legal prostitution system, you have to get your regular checkups, you have to
Right.
practice sanitary practice, all of this stuff, right? So it's all managed, and it benefits the woman profoundly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
of course, it being legitimate in society also benefits the men.
Right.
That the guilt part of it, it's sanctioned, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
Absolutely.
It may still be a little bit looked down upon and all that, but really, it's as from what I could see, that I never really got that feeling that there's a big stigma to it,
Right. Right.
and not that guys cared particularly. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're walking around the streets picking up whatever, you don't care.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's so
But
interesting.
it does provide that outlet. And
Mm,
in America, yes, there's the big escort industry, but these incels don't have the money for it.
right.
Prostitution is not so obvious in America. It
Mm,
exists like it does everywhere, but it's certainly not obvious here. It's
absolutely.
very interesting.
Yeah.
It takes some bit of skill and discernment to connect to this, and
Right.
these guys don't have that,
Right.
so they get removed from it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which, if you really wanted to really help these guys, you would sort of make them a little bit more aware, but they typically don't have the money for it.
Mm-hmm.
I told you about the guy, the client, right, who was very involved with the escort girls and all this. He
Oh
said
wow.
something very interesting. He said Facebook was a great place for him to connect. So he has a Facebook profile with just some name and no picture, no nothing. And he said, "Well, that was kind of how I did it."
Wow.
Right. So when you see you sort of see these profiles and you think, "Wow, where's the logic here?" Well, there was the logic,
Yeah.
because on the other side, the ones that are putting it out, when this guy friends me, he's got one thing on his mind only.
Yeah. That's
It was a very obvious clue. It's fascinating. When I
yeah.
first, I was an idiot. When I first came on Facebook, people send me a friend request. Oh, thank you, and I would just accept.
Right. Right.
Like, all right, I don't know who you are, but I'm happy to be friends with anybody.
Right.
I never checked on them. I just accepted. Then I started to click. Well, so then I started looking at it, and of course, just you probably the woman get it much more than the guys. You get guys friending you with that kind of intent involved. It's
It
kind of
it
amazing,
it's
poor
am-
women. I feel sorry for them, how much they've got to put up with this crap.
it is amazing to me the number of friend requests that you receive from the most random people all over the world, and there's literally like no reason at all
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
would be
Just trying
contacting.
their luck.
Yeah.
Just trying their luck.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you get really earnest, good people who are totally naive and innocent,
Right.
and they also, when you look at it from when we went through the superiority paradigm, those people who are easily pressured and who are very uncomfortable with awkwardness, and they can't
Right.
say no, and they can't tell a guy to get lost and all this, they become totally easy prey and victims for
Right.
these guys.
Right.
So, and a lot of them, they make friends and they, get invited over and get visas. And you hear that, okay, it's very rare that it happens, but this is the myth that perpetuates these guys.
Right.
So, because of my name, the Sil, a lot of them think it's short for Sylvia. And
Yeah.
so they wouldn't even look at the profile picture for whatever reason. I said, dude, just have a look at the damn profile picture.
Right. Right.
Come on. But anyway, I got lots of requests where they just went purely by the name. And, I had like these chat messages,
Yeah.
and of course, they come from that big macho thing. So eventually I'd say, dude, I'm sorry, but I don't swing that way.
Right.
And then they would be horrified, and this would really be very amusing, that they
Oh,
made
that's
all this
funny.
whole big effort to seduce me, and
Right.
it turns out I'm a guy. It's too funny.
Oh gosh.
I remember this one guy purporting, from, I think it was from Pakistan, if I remember, purporting to be an American general. Right, who friended me, and he had
Mm.
this picture of typical American guy in the uniform, his profile, and all this. So and I said, oh, so are you proposing marriage? Yes, I am. Wow, those laws are still new and fresh, but I don't go that way. It's too fresh.
That's,
I have fun with it sometimes.
yes, that's
It's,
too funny.
I tease them a bit. But
That,
seriously, it's just too intriguing, the desperation, in other words.
yeah. Something you said a minute ago reminded me of something I intended to bring up with you, and Sue actually posted something about it that made me think of it again. I don't even remember how I got started on this original thought the other day, but somehow I was thinking about the whole non-confrontational thing, and not wanting to tell people, when you were talking about nice people who don't want to tell people to screw off basically and then get sucked into this big thing. Somehow or other I was thinking the other day about how non-confrontationalism and sort of people pleasing is definitely still it's something that I logically I know, that does not make me a good person to just go along with whatever anybody else wants. But I think, really struggle. I was thinking through the other day, like, why is people pleasing and non-confrontationalism still something that feels like there still feels like a pressure there for me? And basically the thing that all of it boiled down to was, I hate the idea of being responsible
Yes.
for
Yes.
hurting someone else's
Yes.
feelings, for making
Yes.
someone else feel bad. It is like, for example, I was thinking, okay, is it just that I don't want to be the bearer of bad news? Like, do I not want to be the one that causes hurt indirectly
Yes.
or directly?
Yes.
And I was like,
Yes.
no, like, if I'm picturing a scenario where I have to tell someone bad news that doesn't really have anything to do with me, sure, it would be unpleasant, but this isn't something that would be,
Yeah.
like, I would avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
So really,
Because it's not you.
right. And
That is the
really,
result of their misery.
right, what it comes down to, I think, for me is, I don't want, I forget, I worked it all out in my head. It was while I was driving, so of course I couldn't write it down, but it was something like, I don't want my feelings about something to be the cause of someone else's
Yes.
pain,
Yes. Yes.
And
yes.
so that is still this major, like, pressure for me of, logically, I understand that that's just the way things work, and it's not my fault, it's not, whatever, but there's still majorly pressure there for me, and I was trying to sort of think through things and work through it, but I'm curious your thoughts on this subject.
All right. So when we look at this in the context of, like, you could call it the niceness paradigm,
Mm-hmm.
we have such an ingrained, indoctrinated, pressured psychology that we have to be nice.
Right.
Our entire psychology of being, our self-identification is with nice. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm not nice, I negate myself, as it
Right.
were. And this is where that pressure comes from. Right? So the way out of it is to say, am I being truly nice or just short-term nice?
Right.
To look at it in the context of short-term versus longer term. Yes, I may do something in the short term which they don't like so much, but I'm being nice to them in the bigger picture.
Right.
So I'm actually truly being really nice by being honest, and it's, by not putting band-aids on things and on and
Right.
all that.
Somehow that has never helped me get out of that. Like, I know that and completely understand that concept logically, but somehow emotionally,
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter.
Right. And that's where the feeling and the belief loop comes from.
Right. Right.
Right. Because now when we understand that I get sucked into that and the one reinforces the other, and I end up in this
Right.
infinity loop, right, where they keep reinforcing each other. So the way to break it is to really look at the belief and the feeling and to see that they are reinforcing each
Right.
other.
Right.
And also to practice getting into scientific mode, or science observer mode, right? That where you observing your subjects are getting shocks for the purpose of your experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see this dispassionately. It's necessary. It's a little unpleasant. It doesn't kill them, but hey, it's they volunteered for it, because you will get superfluous males to volunteer for anything,
Right.
right? Especially if you're an attractive scientist.
Right.
So it's really true. It's fascinating. But my point is that, all right, I'm making a bit fun of it, but when you see this ability to be a dispassionate observer,
Yeah.
it now takes us automatically into a space where we can observe that loop of feeling and believing.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful skill. So when in that space, I zoom out and get into my scientist mode, and I get into that dispassionate mode, and that solves the problem 10 to
Right.
1. I mean, how do people become doctors,
Uh,
or scientists, where you're dealing with pain? You need to have that ability. They train them to zoom out and to be dispassionate. Otherwise, you get too sucked in, and you can't be a medical professional, or in psychology too. If you over empathize, you,
yeah.
you become inefficient in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, to say, hey, you know what? Well, just in very typical thing, when you see the naked body, you can't be sexually attracted to them, right?
Right.
So, I'm a doctor. It's okay. I've seen plenty, but that's because the doctor's capable, or you can see that they're not in that
Right.
space. They've removed the emotionality from it. They've put themselves in that rational observer space, and that's a skill we can practice.
Yeah. Yeah. That's.
Actually, be useful to practice it somewhat with Tank.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, especially if you're conditioning and training him, when you say no, your no means no, not because there's an emotional weight attached to it, right? Which a little bit, in terms of when I hear you deal with Tank, there is a scale, right? The more emotional energy you put into it, the more you mean it, at least from his logic,
Right.
right? But if he was absolutely trained and conditioned, it would matter nothing. When you say no, it's instant and immediate, and he obeys.
Right.
Like a computer would.
Right.
There's no emotionality to your commands.
Yeah.
So it's useful to when you do train, and maybe a bit late with Tank now, but still to also just to see when Tank does his stuff, to respond, but without the emotionality. So that, yes, I'm saying no with an aggressive overtone, but I'm not actually bothered. Right. So my surface behavior and my inner emotional state are two different things. Very, very, very useful skill to develop.
Yeah.
Very useful skill. Very powerful. So
Yep.
detachment, really, that's the word I was looking for. Detachment.
Yeah.
The skill of professional detachment.
Yeah.
So when you look at this in the same way as the scientist or the doctor has to have this, so does anybody in management, right?
Yeah.
And for me, so does anybody in a societal environment. If I'm going to be somebody who is good at being in society, I need to have the same skill, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know what the equivalent noun is, a societer.
Yeah. I don't know.
What I mean? You're a doctor, scientist, a
Right.
manager, but when
Yeah.
you're just in a societal environment, like at a cocktail party or whatever, you need to have the same skill. So, but this is where our self-conception as a spirit warrior or whatever, a Mournus Mage came up recently, by the way, as a
Oh,
cool
I like
one. Yeah, yeah. So our self-conception, in other words, this is what enables us to say, hey, for me as a bonus mage, I need to have this ability to be detached, and I need to have that ruthlessness of the nurse or the good mother as well,
it.
right? And that also enables me to move into that mode where I can deal with things
Right.
purely from a rational, logical point of view. I take all emotion out of it. It just takes practice. That's all it does.
Yeah.
Because you see a woman, right, who are easily bothered and pressured, this niceness. right, for themselves, and they're completely victims of it. But when their children are involved, they switch it off and say, no, get lost, don't touch my children. And they're completely different people. So it all depends on the motivation and the pressure. We can leverage that, in other words, right?
Yeah.
So one way to use this is to treat your emotions or relate to them as if they're your children.
I like that.
And you're protecting your children from abuse, right? Because that's what happened with people like that. They're coming and they're exploiting your empathy, right? They're exploiting your emotions, and your emotions are typically very much like children. They're
Yeah.
open, they're innocent, they're somewhat naive, and they're vulnerable, right? That's what makes them so precious, their purity. So if you treat your emotions as your children, you can switch into that mother mode. Oh, I've got to protect you. Sorry,
Right.
what? You're not getting near this. It's very cool. It's very cool. Aspect management, in other words, right? To switch into that nurse mode or that mother mode, or the scientist mode, very, which is part again of the self-conception mindset. I need to have my scientist warrior side to me. Very
Mm,
necessary, right? Or my nurse, my matron, my head matron mode. Yeah, very powerful.
yeah.
Leveraging our aspects. Very cool. Very cool. I'm looking at the time. I don't know what your time for your exit time is.
Yes. I'm gonna have to jump off here in a few. They
Okay. Okay.
said they were almost done, so I'll have to go
Yeah.
pick them
Yeah. No problem. No problem. Well, what fascinating stuff. So just to tie it all back together to that post, if you get a chance, go and read my comment at the end of it, the extended comment, and I'll be happy to hear your comments too, on it, because I go into the depth of it. This issue of rationalization, particularly in the sophistication of what I was saying, when it comes to where we have somewhat free choice to say, hey, whatever I choose, I'm going to rationalize. Let me choose wisely. Right? Like in the case of life after death, for instance, I use it as an example there. But it applies to many other things too, right? In our day-to-day living. Yeah. I can
True.
rationalize anything, so let me choose stuff that's beneficial to me.
Right.
Yeah. Now, whether it's true or not, totally irrelevant. In the same case, like this case where you said, the pressure of emotional pressure, not being nice, or being not nice to somebody, we can do the same here to choose to believe something that's going to give us the benefit. I'm going to choose to believe that I can find a way to deal with this, like we just did by saying, hey, I can shift my aspects, I can get into mother mode or scientist mode. So there's always a way to get what we want through rationalization when we're aware of it. Very cool.
Well, and yeah, I mean
Very
that's a huge point to me, that just being aware of the fact that by nature humans rationalize our choices. And
Yeah.
so every choice that you have made,
Yeah.
just be aware of the fact that you are likely
Yes.
constantly rationalizing your choices.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I yes.
such a good argument for going back and reevaluating your choices constantly,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
you need to make
Exactly.
sure that you're not still making that choice just because
Exactly.
you're rationalizing it.
Exactly. 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 And maybe you might be even inspired to make a video comment.
No, I like it. I like it.
And when we take this all the way and we look at our reality as being a description, particularly a collaborative description, right? And we see how everything
Mhm.
we rationalize our very reality.
Right, right. Yeah,
So
that's
it's all just energy. And, we're rationalizing the fact that it's real by describing it as reality, not
right.
as a description.
Right.
So, yeah, it's fascinating. You want to take it to its extreme.
Right.
We're in a mass psychosis of rationalization, a collaborative psychosis.
Yeah.
Makes you think, yeah.
Yes.
I'll,
Yeah.
I'll, I'll go on more about because it's very powerful, in terms of the world being a description, and law of attraction, and all of its nonsense, but also where there is some measure of validity there, and how it all works. It's
Yeah.
we've touched on it before, but it'd be good to go into it in the context of this rationalization. Also, in the context of niceness and the problems of niceness,
Mhm.
here's where capital diplomacy comes in. So I get to be nice, and I get to be ruthless, and I get to be appropriate. I get to be logical, sensible, rational. All of it combined with, and I get to do them together. They're not in contradiction to each other, right? So in other words, I can tell somebody to get lost in a nice way, where
Yeah.
they enjoy getting lost. That's capital diplomacy. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it enables me to satisfy all criteria,
Mm-hmm.
and I like strategies like that, where I'm satisfied on all criteria.
Yeah.
The ability to get people to perceive the awful truth, and they're getting into it easily and gently. You're not forcing it down their throats. That's capital diplomacy once again.
Right. Yeah.
But dealing with BMNs and dealing with people who put emotional pressure on you is absolutely one of the prime benefits of capital diplomacy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And awareness in the moment, the power pause, that's the absolute most important. To be able to not get into the emotional pressure bubble. Once you're in the feeling and believing loop, it's too late.
Right.
So that ability to see it ahead of time and switch, that preemptive anticipation, where
Mm-hmm.
you can, because if you're already in scientist mode, you can handle anything, right? It's like when you go to the morgue, you put yourself in a space, you're prepared for whatever it is, right? As opposed to somebody just wheeling in a dead body and say, hey, look, who's this? That's going to freak you out for the most part, right? At least most people, when it comes on you, and you're not prepared for it. When you can have the ability to preset yourself ahead of time, you can switch modes, right? So part of this is that anticipation mindset and the awareness, to be aware that you can shift modes. You don't have to go with your default.
Right.
So that the self-conception becomes a tool that you apply on demand.
Mm-hmm.
But also not after the fact, but ahead of the time, right? That's the key, is to be aware that this application of our self-conception, whatever we're using, mother, scientists, whatever, to do it ahead of time, that you're setting yourself for it. And it's like if you get a warning, your boss is coming to crap you out and give you hell. If you get a warning, you can set yourself where it's like, but if it catches you by surprise, then it's terrible, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's amazing how we can prepare for stuff. And also when you volunteer, it changes everything,
Yeah.
right? If you go into it willingly. So now your boss is out for you. You go and approach the boss and say, what's happening, boss?
Right.
Now it changes everything. I'm a volunteer. We can put up with incredible stuff when we volunteer. Survivor, the TV show, was fascinating for that, when they ate the horrible stuff, right?
Yes.
Volunteers, they did stuff they would never otherwise do, but because they're volunteers, they can do it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we can our motivation be volunteers.
There we go. I caught up.
Massively changes everything. This is the magic of deliberate living.
Mm-hmm.
When we being deliberate, we are essentially being volunteers. No,
Right. Right.
we initiate, and that changes everything.
True.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Deliberate living is so huge for that. Right? So next time you find yourself in any such situation, go into it deliberately. Set your tone, set your mood, set your conception, and volunteer. Go into it deliberately and see how it changes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even on a small scale, when you dealt with some of the sticky issues with Kay, you volunteered.
Right.
And it made it doable for you,
Right.
and made it palatable, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
The volunteering changed everything. Very
Absolutely.
powerful concept, volunteering. Again, deliberateness, right? It's the same thing. I prefer deliberateness because it has more to it. It implies strategy and foresight and forethought and all this, deliberateness, rather than volunteering, which is, all right, I volunteer, I can just jump in blindly, right? So deliberate is volunteering with discernment and forethought and anticipation and awareness and strategy, right?
Right.
Deliberate living is a real power.
Absolutely.
An incredible power. And I strive to feel deliberate in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Remind me next time to talk about meditation.
Okay.
Yeah. At least, WOI, at least my version of meditation, a whole different take on meditation.
Yeah. Okay.
because
Sounds
it all ties into rationalization and the description, and it's all, well, everything is always tied together.
good.
All right,
Okay.
you better go. I don't want you to be late for whatever it is.
I appreciate it. I know. I've got to go get Bandit so that he's not sitting up
Oh,
there.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. All right, fabulous, Erica. Fabulous, fabulous,
Well, thanks for letting
fabulous,
me know.
fabulous. Yeah, yeah. I really treasure our sessions. They are magic.
You too.
Brilliant.
You too.
See
All
you next
right.
time. See you next time. Bye bye, Erica. Bye bye, bye bye, bye bye. Ah, such magic, such magic, such magic.